Hey, folks, we're going to go ahead and just hop into this one. So, I reckon most of you know that the Naked Gospel and Proven Ministries, as the parent company for the Naked Gospel, helped create a resource a couple years ago called the sextalk.com, where it's just like a lot of relationships, a lot of really cool people: Kurt Thompson, Matt Fradd, Christopher West, black, white, male, female, Catholic, Protestant. We came together and created this resource. And it's been doing really well. But there's a particular reaction to it that we continue to get. And so I asked Nicholas Liberto. Nick is one of my best friends. He's my boss. He is literally the reason the Naked Gospel exists. So I'm pretty thrilled to have him on because we don't get to play in this space. But I asked him to come on and just process with us. What is this kind of like cultural, ecclesiological, theological debacle that we keep finding ourselves in when it comes to the sextalk.com? Nick, thanks for being here, dude.
Yeah, man. Honored to be here. Right out the gate, the idea was mine. But thanks to generous donors, like maybe some listening right now, we were able to actually do it. So for those of you that, maybe don't know, we're pretty on the nose about finances. We're very transparent, and the Sex Talk cost us 100 grand to build. So 2 years and $100,000 of money invested by donors allowed us to create in my opinion, one of the most transformative video curriculum resources for the 21st century when it comes to equipping your children. I know that sounds bold, and but having done this work for 8 years now, we see the horror stories every day, and I think a lot of parents are all too often a bit naive, and I'm a parent, so I can say that with a little bit more authority these days. Yeah, and so I don't know. I'm excited about this conversation, Shane, because it's probably going to be a lot more, listeners, you're a fly on the wall to, things Shane and I regularly dissect or engage with. And I was telling Shane yesterday that I was a bit frustrated, may not be the right word, maybe disillusioned, maybe a little bit disappointed because we keep getting some pushback from different Christian evangelical communities around the sex talk. And I mean, there's three very clearly, and we're going to dissect one of them. So the three are: it doesn't fit into our calendar of programming right now. We are going to get around to it later. And for me, that's always really hard because it's like, the enemy's not waiting for the correct programming calendar year. He is coming after your children actively. And it's always fascinating to me because it is a low lift for them to turn the thing on and bless their parents and invest into their children. But hey, apparently it doesn't fit into some of their calendars of programming. The other one
Nick, and the they here
is
is churches, right?
churches,
Okay.
church staff, church employees, church pastors.
It's
So,
not
yeah,
convenient for calendar rotation currently.
correct. Yeah, and most churches have a 12 to 18 month calendar already scheduled, and their mindset and framework is everything has to fit into that to have like a launch, an execution, a platform, a slide on the screen, an announcement from the stage. And we're basically saying, hey, all you have to do is turn this on, put a flyer outside of your kids' area, and email your parents. So it's a low lift. It's not like we need a whole stage announcement, Saturday night talk, and all this. So that's a bit frustrating for me. I literally had two significant churches basically say, yeah, 12 to 18 months, we'll circle back around to this and see if we can fit it in then. Which is tough for me to hear because I'm thinking about the kids that, in 12 to 18 months might get exposed to pornography for the first time, might experience sexual abuse, sexual trauma, some of the horror stories we can dissect here. The second thing is the intentional choice we made to build this curriculum in an ecumenical fashion. So we have two prominent Catholic teachers, Matt Fradd and
Christopher
Christopher
West.
West,
Yeah.
and and there's a lot of churches that'll say, you know, sorry, we can't engage with this curriculum because you've chosen to give a voice to two individuals that are Catholic. That's a whole nother podcast we should do about how Proven Ministries is really, really passionate about the bride of Christ in
Yeah.
all of its forms. And we love our Catholic brothers and sisters, and it's really frustrating. But like I said, another podcast. I'm not going to get on that soapbox right now. And the third one is specifically what we're going to talk about today, which I'm excited for your input, Shane, because while I am versed on the topic, I'm not, in my opinion, the expert on the topic. And it's our choice to acknowledge that as some of the parents are going through this curriculum, they may discover, they may find that their children are
Excuse me.
struggling with same sex attraction, gender confusion. It's almost a no brainer to acknowledge that in our culture today because it is thrust into all of our faces and especially into our children's faces. Whatever commercials you watch, it's everywhere. And so, by acknowledging that, we chose to highlight a resource, and I would even say at this point, a ministry or an organization, the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender, founded by Preston Sprinkle and potentially others. And it's just been really frustrating for me. I'm really disillusioned and frustrated that it's so hard to serve the church, serve the bride, because they want to quibble and fight over things. And that's what I want to talk about today, because you know, our listeners probably don't experience this view. And so I actually think it's really helpful because people are like, oh, yeah, church is church. But then we wonder why the light of the gospel is waning in our culture today. We wonder why people are starting to say we're in a post Christian nation. We're seeing massive division over egalitarian, complementarian, this gender conversation, and other things. And it reminds me of the denominational splits over, you know, baptism and other things of that nature, you know, previously in history. So I'm just, you know, I'm curious what your thoughts are, Shane, because I have now been in 3 heated conversations with pastors where they said Preston Sprinkle is a link. It's just a link at the very end of your curriculum as a resource for mom and dad if they find that their child is struggling with same sex attraction or gender confusion. And we have other links down there too. But because he is one of them, he's become anathema. I think that's the right word. Uh,
There's some sort
and
of heresy.
individuals, yeah, individuals like Rosario Butterfield, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, this is probably not a Proven Ministries perspective, is very inappropriately and loudly from stage regularly saying that Preston Sprinkle is a heretic as recently as a month ago at the Ligonier conference. And she has no humility and she does it with a ton of pride and it is ugly every time she opens her mouth. But I like her and I like the things that she teaches. So it's just a shame because that's what I'm now finding is there's this divide taking place. And apparently Preston Sprinkle is finding himself and anyone near him is getting basically like, you can't go near that third rail. Don't touch that. And I don't know. It's just frustrating because it's like, it would be inappropriate not to acknowledge that parents are going to encounter children experiencing gender confusion or same sex attraction. But it's important to note this conversation has nothing to do with affirming ideology. We are not in, nor is Preston Sprinkle in the affirming camp. So,
Yeah.
Shane, I don't know. I think high level for the listeners. Sorry, I just like talked for a really long time there, but help because I'm going to act like the person who doesn't know as much, which is most of the listeners here around this conversation. So, like, I would love for you to even help clarify for me what's the breakdown and which there's like side A, side B. I don't know if it's C, D, X, Y. It's
Right.
like, did you guys just want to find an LGBTQ plus and like follow
Yeah.
that acronym? It's like,
Right.
anyway, so like, what's going on? Where's Preston Sprinkle fall? And then I don't know. Let's just talk about it, man.
Yeah, I dig that. Thank you for laying that out, Nick. And I hear your frustration, and I do. I get it. And it's good to be honest about it, I think at the very least. I love that Proven doesn't try and resource people by circumventing the church. Proven
Hmm.
has been like, I mean, 20 some years, right? Like very committed to not circumventing the church, but to resourcing the church so that the church can resource its people. We don't say, "Hey, go to church for God's word, but come over here if you actually want to be freed and restored from sexual sin, sexual integrity, unwanted sexual behavior." We don't do that, and we never have. So in the midst of, I think part of the difficulty, and that I've heard you express and that I've experienced alongside you is that like we're just doing our best. We're just doing our best to clothe the bride of Christ. We're a dress manufacturer, like we're just like the bride of Christ is like kind of in her lingerie, sometimes less out in culture, giving herself to different idols. And we're like, hey, we've made some dresses, we've made soap, right? We're in the hygiene business, and we're here to help clean, to rinse, to restore alongside. I mean, that is the ministry of Christ. Um, so I think part of the frustration is that we're not trying to circumvent, we're trying to submit to the church, and the church is saying, hey, when it's convenient, or how dare you put that name in there, and not have maybe a conversation around that. So specifically with Preston, Nick, I would be curious, maybe like just I think if I were a listener, I'd be interested first off to know what's the big deal with Preston's resource? Why maybe it's just pride on y'all's part that you won't just like sub it out for a different resource. Surely there are so many other resources that are just as good, if not better. And y'all's refusal to just take out that link and put in a different one. What gives? Can you speak to that for a second?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are very intentional about, I like your analogy of giving the bride of Christ, the church, good clothes to put on. More practically put, we're equipping her with tools she doesn't have. And we don't like giving tools that aren't fully baked. That's a two analogies in one. Sorry there. But
That's good.
yeah, it's like so the short version is it it would be it's funny for me to say this because the internal joke of the ministry is I have everybody else here to help me have like a moral compass because I generally just like react and then I need somebody to be like, "Yo, Nick, that's probably not a good idea." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's a bit unethical. We shouldn't do that."
Right.
And so I've never, in my personal opinion, I don't think I've ever had as clear of a conscience over something than this, where it
Right.
feels wrong to delete Preston Sprinkle's resource. It feels like we would be doing parents a disservice. And even to further honor the quote unquote differences, we have included a resource now from Christopher Yuan, who and Rosario Butterfield partnered with him to do it, and it's the Holy Sexuality Project. But then we equally include the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender, and more specifically, parentinglgbtqkids.com, a video course to help parents with their children who might be struggling in that area. And I have dissected every inch of both of those curriculums.
Hmm.
And Preston Sprinkle's course, parentinglgbtqkids.com, is the best thing I've seen in my 36 years of being on this earth for parents. There's plenty of curriculum out there, books out there to help individuals and Christians process homosexuality, same-sex attraction, and in this entire conversation. However, there is next to nothing for a mom and a dad trying to process and struggle through how to love and come alongside of their child well in this area. And Preston's curriculum knocked it out of the park. It is phenomenal. It is the best thing I've ever seen. I think every Christian should go through it, even if you're not a parent, with a child who's struggling with same-sex attraction. It's fantastic. And Preston, more directly, has, his org, his ministry, they're very vocal in this space. So it's beyond the course itself. It's maybe some of the other things he's said as well. But he is too often perceived as too close to affirming, because Preston's posture, obviously this is me postulating or hypothesizing from my observations, is is heavily leaning towards love and discipleship and nurturing and caring. He is not ignoring the truth. However, his practice is more, let's begin a relationship with them and then allow Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and our relationship to minister the truth to them over time. Never once accidentally, in my opinion, stepping over the line into an affirming space. I have never observed him to do that. And in my personal opinion, from my observations as well, it is because of people like Rosario Butterfield and Christopher Yuan who have chosen to make public, overt statements about him, and the Gospel Coalition as well. And it's unfortunate because it's another example of Christians throwing shade at other Christians. And I see the foundation. I see the point. The point is, we can't allow heresy. We got to call stuff out when we see it. And I don't know, for me, it just gets um, disappointing because I don't think they're giving each other charity and or conversing. Like Preston Sprinkle, I've dissected so much of this in conversations with other pastors. He tried to reach out to Rosario Butterfield
Mm.
to engage her in a good faith conversation, and she didn't even respond to his request. Her husband did, who's the pastor of the church, and basically said, our differences are so stark, it doesn't even matter for us to get in conversation. So Preston was
That
forced
sucks.
to put out a paper saying, Rosario and individuals like her have said these things about me. Let me clearly show you how and why I'm not a heretic, for lack of a better term, and how I'm not saying these things. And there's a lot of like quibbling over the definition of terms. One of the biggest ones is, because Preston Sprinkle will acknowledge a world where someone can be same sex attracted yet choose celibacy. That's kind of like the big no-no from my perception. And again, I'm more excited to hear your insight because I might be getting some of this wrong. Whereas saying someone's a gay Christian, it really pisses off a whole lot of like the Reformed community and a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other individuals. And Preston, explains that and clear, and so they're quibbling over the definition of the way the term gay is used. And Preston is saying gay means attracted to the same gender yet choosing in Christian, like choosing to live in a celibate way. And the other side is saying, well, if you say gay, that means you're affirming them as who they are, as this thing.
That's exactly, yeah.
And ironically, oh boy, it's really not ironically, it's so frustrating to serve the church sometimes, because the context for really why we're having this conversation is because, without naming names, there was a foundation that reached out to us. I didn't even knock on their door, and they love everything that we do, and they love the sex talk, and they were going to pay for every church in a state in the United States to have free access to Proven Ministries curriculum. And because we choose to have one link in one curriculum offering, the sextalk.com, that is Preston Sprinkles, the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender. It's not even a direct link to parentinglgbtqkids.com. That one link has, or will kill that opportunity to serve the bride. And it's just like, I just want to go hit my head against the wall. It's
Yeah.
like insane.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So Again, share the frustration. I'm with you. Okay, so yeah, so maybe an easy way is like, is homosexuality, is gay a verb or a noun? So that's helpful because it's is it something that I can be, or is it something that I do? If it's a noun, then I am gay. If it's a verb, then it's an activity, having sex with
Yep.
another man for me. Um, let's see, Rosaria and Al Mohler and Presbyterian denomination as a whole, a lot of Baptist branches, they would say that it can't be a noun. Somebody isn't gay, they're acting gay, they're living a gay lifestyle. Whereas Preston and a lot of other people, it's not just Preston on a hill by himself, like Preston and a lot of others would say, no, 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 like, yeah, you could have like when you lust or when you go to watch porn or like when you fantasize, is it to the same sex or the opposite sex? Regardless, they would say it's a lust issue. And
Yes.
regardless, they would say, okay, what's biblically permissible, right? They would say opposite sex marriages are permissible. He would say this is the teaching of Jesus.
Yep.
He would say that, what is it? I think the Genesis male and female is quoted something like 6 times in the New Testament, and 3 of those times are by Jesus. So he made them male and female, right? And in the context of marriage. So like Preston's really biblically anchored there. And fantasizing about anybody apart from them, whether it's opposite sex or same sex, is lust and shouldn't be done. So like all on the same level there. For him, you just said, yeah, it's totally possible for somebody to mostly, if not exclusively, lust for somebody that's their sex. In which case they're gay, and we need to consider them. We need to regard them. We need to figure out what does it mean to be on mission for them. God has just as much affection for them as anyone else. Um, so I know, like, if I were a parent, I would really, really want helpful resources in a situation like that. And it is interesting, assuming that that's clear. Nick, you can tell me if it's not. Like, I think it's really, what I hear you saying is it's not just a hill that you're not just siding with a side. You're saying at the end of the day, because I know you, Nick, I know you've been through, like you mentioned, going through, like coming through 2 curriculums. Like, I know you've done that for like 100, if not hundreds of curriculums over years. Like literally, it's just what you do. You're very, very thorough. And for you to say it's the best out there means that you've paid for a lot of other ones. You've gotten access to a lot of other ones. You've combed through like dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, like a lot of time. So first off, is that distinction clear between noun and verb, kind of being gay versus doing gay?
Yeah, I mean, that is the easiest way in layman's terms to explain the divide, is the noun versus the verb. And there's plenty of people that'll have deep navel-gazing theological conversations about the nuances and the details of it. But at its core, for the layman, yes, that is the divide that we're seeing.
Yeah, so there are different, and then there are different branches of this. So then there's maybe more like a liberal, maybe mainstream position that it's totally okay to not only noun gay, but verb gay, to be gay and
Which,
to pursue,
yeah, which we are openly against.
which
And
is not
like,
Preston's position. Yeah, it's not ours
nor
either.
ours
Yeah,
exactly, which is worth mentioning if someone's
yeah,
still here and listening in that regard. Yeah,
yeah,
that conversation is not even on the table,
yeah.
so that's even more, yeah,
So that would be
fascinating
like
to
on
me.
one spectrum, and then on the other end of the spectrum would be that, okay, basically anybody who has same-sex attraction is like maybe like so warped in sin or something like that that they need to, maybe they're only gay because, no, they would probably say that like no one is ever born gay, no one is ever noun gay. Yeah, it's more like saying I'm a drunkard. Like I'm an alcoholic. Hey, I'm a born again alcoholic, which is it's just contradiction of terms. So I'm a born again homosexual. What they would say is as a contradiction of terms. And to Preston's credit, like anybody listening to this, his podcast is Theology in the Raw. He has really long form discussions with like the top Greek and Hebrew scholars, with anthropologists. Like he is very committed. Like he's got his own, yeah, PhD from a very prestigious school in Europe. Like he's done the work and he continues to consult with experts and a lot of people that have a different position than him. And he really just, as far as I see, like wants to know the truth. So we're talking about like truth and love. So the command to speak the truth in love. And then what comes to mind too is the passage, John 1, where it says Jesus came full of grace and truth. And that grace and truth were embodied in one person. It seems like if you have one and not the other, then you're not following the incarnational king. And that just seems like that's what Preston's trying to do. He's trying to follow Jesus faithfully.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would say back to the noun versus the verb and the divide that we see that proven ministry specifically is seeing. Um, Preston is really, really good at grace and then truth. And the other side is truth in your face, truth, and then we can maybe discuss grace. Um, and I mean, another, in my opinion, funny example, and I don't mind mentioning them on this podcast because it's appropriate. Like the amount of people that try or at least have something to say about distancing themselves from us because we have partnered with Elevation Church in the past is another similar example of people find a reason to not enjoy Elevation or engage with Elevation because of the things that people and culturally are saying. And Elevation is another example of grace and truth. They are in no way compromising on truth. And we're not going to fall down this tangent, but yes, Preston Sprinkle is very good and he overemphasizes grace first, then truth. However, he has never once, in my perception and opinion of dissecting his curriculum, ever compromised the truth, even in outs. Because I'd be like, if you find that, send it to me. I'll delete it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like if it's there, it's gone because we are not allowing for that. But in my opinion, he is more appropriately engaging the community. And another book for listeners reading. I haven't read all of them. Shane may have read all of them around the same-sex attraction conversation in our world today and the books that have been written in the 21st century about this topic. But the one I just recently read that I love is A War of Loves by David Bennett.
David
And
Bennett's awesome.
it's like top 10 book for me. It's
It's so
so
good.
well written,
Yeah.
and David's similar tone, this isn't a full-on synopsis of the book, but is he noticed a stark difference between Christians that first were like truth and in his face pickets and you're a sinner going to hell and how could you this that and the other, because he was a gay activist, but he met Jesus and he very much responded and was met by Christians who loved Jesus, who first engaged in grace with him and community and love and what I would say is the heart of Jesus. They never compromised on truth either. And so, yeah, you said it right.
What's baffling to me is so take somebody like Matt Fradd. Like so many people listen to Matt Fradd that are not Catholic, so many Protestants. And then so many Protestants have endorsed his book, The Porn Myth, which is incredible. So it's
Yep.
wild to me that like we kind of cherry pick or pick and choose what sort of medium is uh acceptable to like receive content. Um, I think what's baffling and maybe difficult about a situation like this is so you got Ephesians, what is it, Ephesians 4, Ephesians 5. So the church exists for the equipping of the saints. to grow them into the measure, the stature, the fullness of Christ. Like that's why the church exists. Um, it's a really important, like a lot of parents have no idea what to do. They're very, very intimidated, like so intimidated by the world around them, by like the world within their home, on the television, on the phones, on the iPad. And they're outsourcing this issue to pastors, to youth pastors, to mentors. It's super intimidating. It's like, dude, we've literally built this entirely for you. Um, it'll do all the work for you. It will ensure that like you have a clear conscience. You can say, hey, like I was a heck of a parent. Like I am doing my best. And because like part of second guessing yourself is you're trying, but you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's what we built that. Uh and so there's the frustration of like so many people in their homes are like so maybe what causes disillusionment for me, if I'm putting my cards on the table, is that middle schoolers are having oral sex, and like we're afraid to even say sex in like we don't say it in church. We're afraid to say it in our homes. But like kids go on the bus, they go to school, and if they're not having that sort of activity, then all their friends around them are at least talking about it, if not having
Yep.
it themselves. They're very aware. And a lot of kids seek out pornography or discover pornography because they look up things that their friends are talking about because they don't want to look stupid. Right. So, what does it look like for them to actually be able to come to their parents, and their parents to not just be reactive, but to be proactive, to like have a relational offense and not just a reactive defense in the midst of all of this?
No, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, I cannot count the amount of conversations I have had with parents now that thought they were crushing it as a parent in this area and had failed miserably.
Dang.
I would, I'm a parent, so I can get on my soapbox a bit on this issue. I think it's a bit of pride, hubris, and laziness. And yes, this is going to sound harsh. Sorry, parents, if you're listening. But now that I am a parent of three, I'm so passionate about this. And it's so frustrating if I have to talk to a mom of another 12-year-old who just found out their kid's been addicted for the last 3 years, because it's almost like we don't want to acknowledge we live in a world ruled and reigned by the enemy, like everywhere. And you cannot curate enough of an environment to protect your children from it. And then if you can say and concede that, or believe me on that, or find a way to get your mindset to understanding that, then the next conversation goes, well, I don't want to expose my kids too early. And I don't even think that's on the table, because what we're talking about is giving them a beautiful and robust biblical sexual ethic for the way God made the body and humans. And it's elegant and it's beautiful. And my 3-year-old can know the word penis and vagina, and can know that a man is married to a woman, and can know that no one touches his penis but mommy and dad when we're changing him and the doctor, and can know that, hey, we don't say that word unless we're going to the bathroom, or unless we're at the doctor, or unless something hurts. My 3-year-old can vocalize that like verbatim. And I've not harmed him in any way. And I'm beginning to build, as a parent, investing into my child's biblical sexual ethic, the foundations for those things. And that's what the sex talk does. Like, at its core, this is not some kind of sales pitch for the sex talk, but just like anything else, literally pick a topic. You don't just hope they get it, you have to teach it to them. And math, science, riding a bike. Hey, you'll just figure out how to ride the bike one day. It'll be okay. Or no, it's like you slowly over time engage. You maybe start with training wheels, then you maybe take one of the training wheels off, then you maybe take both of the training wheels off, but you're still holding the back seat.
Yeah.
And then maybe when they're 12, 13, 14, they're on their own because they've learned how to be safe in that environment and with that tool.
Hmm.
It's like, again, I know I'm biased, but it's like so basic. And instead of watching Netflix tonight for 14 nights in a row, choose to watch the sextalk.com instead, and you'll be the rock star parent when it comes to the sex talk and giving your child a biblical sexual ethic. Say
Mm,
no to Netflix and say yes to keeping your child secured, protected, and safe from the most horrible things in the world today. One of our friends, Pastor Mike Kunzinger, said something to me once, said, I've never been able to shake, and of course I'll butcher it, but it was something to the effect of, nothing ruins and destroys the path of a child like sexual sin, abuse, or brokenness at an early
mm,
age.
yeah.
Because there is literally nothing the enemy wants more. Because the second he can do that, they're on some tangent out in left field, heading in the wrong direction. And the amount of work to restore, and we can speak to that too, because of 23 years of work, we've been pulling people out of the gutter. And it's like, man, can you imagine a generation that's coming next that we don't have to pull out of the gutter, that
Mm,
has a robust marriage, that is not inundated with digital infidelity, that has a robust men's group that, like, it's just, I mean, I could go with the list, I could go on. But anyway, yeah, the sextalk.com, man, it's 23 years of the best knowledge possible given to parents in 14 videos,
mm.
and for next to nothing. And again, that's part of the frustration. Back to this point, and I'll turn it back over to you. It's like, I'm a marketer and I'm fascinated with business and entrepreneurship. So there's a really good argument that we have something amazing. It's just still not the right time,
Mm,
which, I hate for that to be true. I don't want that to be true, but
mm.
I'm having to contend with that reality more and more, where it's like we have literally cured cancer, and we are now literally just trying to tell people about it. And it's like people don't want to accept the cure. And it's so hard for me because, again, I'm being a little bit transparent. I'm okay, everybody. It's okay. I'm just having a fun conversation, talking raw and real to my buddy Shane. But
Yeah.
it is really easy to get jaded and say, you're on your own. Enjoy a post-Christian world where Christianity dies and our children, 70% of them who are already leaving the church, and all of the stuff. And it's like, we wonder why. And, sexuality is tearing our world apart.
To put a little bit of context on that, what Nick just shared, specifically him saying that again, I feel like what he's saying has a gravitas to it because he mentioned earlier three hard conversations of rejections due to this link in the content. Um, and a major foundation who reached out to us who found this and broke off relationship. That does not, if there are three churches that were willing to actually like say that to him, there have been hundreds that didn't and just ghosted. Like I know Nick has literally personally reached out to hundreds of churches, uh,
Thousands.
thousands of churches. Yeah. Um, so Nick, I was at church this past week and I was playing, I had Novella, our dog, outside at church, and this mom and these two little girls come out. And they come over, of course, right to Novella, and they're playing with her. And I start talking to them, and I'm talking to mom and talking to the girls. I'm hanging out with them. I'm on the ground with the girls, playing with the dog, and find out that they're going to a Hillcats game. And um, one of the girls looks at me, and I guess by this point we'd just been playing, and her mom was there, and she looked at, she said, "Hey, do you know why I'm wearing this?" So they both had dresses on, but they also had something underneath their dresses that was a little bit more covering. And these girls are real young, like 5, 6, they're young. And I said, "No, why?" And she said, "To cover up my parts because I want to grow up to be a modest woman." I was just like, oh man, I just like looked right at mom and she just smiled and I was like, this is cool. This is
Hmm.
really cool. Uh, it was one of those moments where it's like, if I think if Nick were here, he'd start crying, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Just a
it's so beautiful.
good moment. So I really appreciate and love what you're doing with your kids. And all of the experts, even the secular ones, are acknowledging that is good. That is a good way, that the over sexualization of everything is only furthering a sort of violation and abuse. Nick, I'm gonna start wrapping this up. Is there any other direction or anything else with this particular aspect of things that, because I know that this will probably be something that I want to continue to dialogue with you about, maybe in public. Um, there are like a lot of things, there are a lot of directions that I'm keeping myself from going. I'm like, that's an episode, that's an episode. You did it in the beginning. But with this particular content, how is there anything else that you want to say? And I'd also want to know, because there are people who love Jesus who are listening. How do you want prayer? How can people be praying?
Great. Two questions. I'll answer the prayer one first. Pray that God would open up the floodgates of resources and doors. And that goes into my second thing, answering your first question. What did I want people to know? What's one thing I want people to know? I was having a conversation with our founder and his wife at lunch 2 days ago. We were having a lovely time. And we were talking about other organizations and just places we were donating money and other local nonprofits in our area. And it was interesting because again, I will acknowledge that I bring bias to it, but 8 years and 36 years of life and a lot of, robust discovery, wisdom, and education, I cannot figure out how sexual integrity is not the thing everybody is acknowledging needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
I can't figure out why we plant churches when a pastor's just going to fall again. I can't figure out why we're training up pastors without any level of training in their pastoral curriculum for sexual integrity. We've checked, by the way, it's not there. And they won't, talk to us so we can help them put it there. It's the amount of marriages ending in divorce because of sexual sin, the amount of people we talk to who are exposed at an ungodly young age. I can't figure out how everybody is not realizing that this is the thing that could potentially fix everything. And again, raw and real here. I'm okay. Everything's fine. But it is very hard because no one brags at Christmas about donating to proven ministries. We're not feeding orphans in Africa, which, by the way, is great. We're not clothing the naked. We're not feeding the poor. I would say, arguably, we are doing more than those things. We are helping at the source, at the true source of these things. We're keeping marriages together so they don't wreck their children. We're keeping young people from falling down a path that will, after leading to sexual sin and addiction, possibly lead to drug addiction and other levels of brokenness. And I don't know. I think that's probably the only other thing I would say is say a prayer for us. It's really hard because it is not easy to get funding. It is not easy to scale something that everybody needs but nobody wants. It is not easy to operate where no one calls you till their house is on fire. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I pray about this every day. God, can I wake up in a world where you just open up your floodgates financially so tremendously that we can stop starving so we can start saving more people? And I don't know. I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm weirdly wired by God to be able to live in this kind of tension. And I'm not that special. It's just a unique thing God gave me. So how and why I'm still here, I'll never know, but I'm just wired by God that way. So I can still wake up tomorrow and be like, we're going to conquer the world. And then I'll get another pastor email that says, kick rocks. And I'll be like, oh, we're going to conquer the world tomorrow. And so if you're listening, be with us, join with us. We literally can't do it without you. It would surprise you how little support we can gain and garner. I don't know. Yeah, that's it. Pray for us, please. Join
Nick,
with us, please.
people who want to check out the sex talk, how can they do it?
Thesextalk.com. If you're unsure, which I don't want you to be because I want you to trust my words, there's a free preview. You could just hop on there and get the free preview. You'll get Matt Fradd's video entirely for free. It's phenomenal. Um, Go check it out. If you are a parent and you are still here and you are still listening, please let me implore you to listen to my words. You do not have time. Your child is not special and different. Satan is on a race with you to get to your children first, and he is almost always winning.
Yeah.
So don't let him win. Get to them first by giving them a defense, by giving them a beautiful biblical sexual ethic. There should be nothing in our world that we cannot talk about that God has made. There's no reason sex has to be one of those things for us as the body of Christ.
Hmm. Hmm. Folks, thank you for being here with us today. Nick, thank you for coming in and having this conversation. I really appreciate it. I want things to work. I want people to be well. A huge aspect of the Naked Gospel podcast is for us to have the sort of conversations as a community that we've longed to have. And these sorts of conversations are the conversations I needed when I was growing up and didn't have them. So thank you for coming on, Nick, and having this conversation. Folks, if you want to get how about this? Maybe two calls to action. One, check out thesextalk.com. Share it around. It's cool. It's really well created, well designed, and we only went to experts for the content. We did not we did not just like I did not do any of the videos, right? Like I don't do any of the talking. We go to the experts, they do the talking. Um, so that's one. Check out thesextalk.com. Two, would you share this episode with somebody you think would benefit from it? Like I said, we want to start having these sorts of raw and honest conversations. And sometimes it's hard to start yourself. And it's easier just to share something and say, hey, what do you think about this? Would you do that with this episode? Just share it with somebody that you think would benefit from it in your community, a family member, whomever. Grateful for all of you. And we will catch you next time on the Naked Gospel podcast.